Welcome to the Aussie Game podcast, where we talk all things Australian football. 100 episodes tonight, so we're celebrating as we have done on a couple of occasions, and this one's dedicated completely to the fans. So thank you everyone for submitting your questions in. Mopper, 100 episodes, just over 12 months since we've been doing the Aussie Game podcast, and gee, a lot has happened in that time, hasn't it?
Oh, it's been an incredible journey, and it's just so good to share the light and to share the fans' reactions and comments every week regarding their passion and their team and their players. We've been very lucky to get deeply involved in exploring where the Aussies are at overseas and at home, and sharing the rides of the success and some of the challenges as we ride the football train.
Absolutely, mate. Yeah, like just to kind of highlight a few things, we had the under-20 Asian Cup, then we've had the under-20 World Cup, we've had the Women's Asian Cup, obviously on home soil, and then obviously most recently the Men's World Cup. So a lot has happened in that 12 months, and it's been awesome to cover it and to hear the opinions of everyone in Australian football that follows it as passionately as we do. We're going to start tonight with a pretty big question. This one comes from Damon, who says, our playing philosophy has been in place for 20 years to play proactive, possession-based football, build from the back, create superiority through intelligent positioning, press aggressively after losing the ball. Is it time to measure the coach against this or update it? What do you make of that question, Mopper?
Oh, it's a fantastic question, and thank you very much for the great philosophy. It's been debated a lot, hasn't it, after our 2026 World Cup exit? Look, I think it comes back to the burning question of our philosophy across all age groups, and to be defined with that philosophy and a coach for that philosophy. If we ever want to evolve our football, I think it's imperative that we take that step. It's proven across the successful nations, and there's definitely time to look at the blueprint and measure each coach with each age group, that we are developing a style and a strategy that's ours, and we can get that through every age group. I think it'll help us succeed in bigger moments and bigger tournaments. Yes, it's going to be a massive decision to make that, but I think if you look at some of the philosophers of football and the key nations like I discussed, if we ever want to get that burning question that everybody has been on everyone's lips since the World Cup exit, is can we get to that next step? Then this is the crucial part of it.
Yeah, well said, mate. I think for me, looking at this, and it's a great question from Damon, and it's kind of forced me to do a bit of research into where we're at in terms of the philosophy. And the last really one that we had available was the national football curriculum that was originally published in 2009 and then updated in 2013 by Hamburger, who was part of the Football Australia, or the then FFA setup. And the interesting thing is that the Football Australia have actually removed that from their website. So in terms of they don't even, so it's a bit hard to hold a coach accountable to that when it doesn't seem like that's Football Australia's strategy going forward. And Heather Garriock obviously has come out recently and saying that we need a plan and we need a strategy around, or a vision. I think the term was, in terms of how we play. And I think that's probably key, but it's interesting. I don't think we can hold our coaches accountable to something that Football Australia hasn't even proposed in place, and it's been discussed at length in terms of what we should do, how we should plan it out, and there's been kind of a few promises that haven't been fulfilled. So I think in terms of holding coaches accountable, and that probably comes into Tony Popovich and Joe Montemurro, I don't think we can do that until we have an actual philosophy down pat and sorted out. So it'd be interesting to see what they do in that approach. And I think that we've talked on occasion, mate, about how we have different kind of formations throughout the different age groups and different things. And probably looking into this in a bit more detail, it's probably not so much about a formation. It's about a philosophy and tapping into what we do best as Australians and then taking a bit of influence from other parts of the world and making sure we implement that at all age levels so that we can have players come through. They can be adaptable to what we need them to be, not hold them to a specific structure. But it is really important, I think, that once this strategy is defined, that future coaches coming in are actually selected to make sure that they can follow this strategy. And then once they're in place, making sure they don't pivot away from that because we are never going to get anywhere, I don't think, as a national team. That's both the Socceroos and the Matildas until we have some kind of structure to work within.
Oh, absolutely. And if we've seen the 20s be successful with a different style of football, 23s again play different style of football, 17s different style of football, and when you get to the World Cup, you're getting these tournament players in, and again we're just playing a different style of football. And you've seen it for our coaches, haven't you? Like we've gone for all different coaches and different styles and different approaches, and it really is a short-term fix if we don't have a blueprint for this. I think it's got to be number one on our agenda. And I think at least when we exit a World Cup or you get knocked out of a tournament, you can then measure that style because obviously, there's too much conjecture, isn't there? When we exited out of 2026, it was like we should have done this, could have done that. We're like what we can't identify. The fans can't identify what's the best solution or what the best way forward is, which means it leaves an open can of worms. And no doubt, if we had a formation or a style of play that you rightly say is more important, then at least we can identify that that style of play is what we're taking in the tournament, and it doesn't go left and it doesn't go right depending on the nation that we play. And I think the fans like the most thing the fans want is when they go to these tournaments, they just want to see that evolve and have that opportunity. Like I think a lot of people got excited in 2022 when it's like, oh, we nearly got Argentina and we nearly got a draw out of it or nearly took them to that next step. But they're excited. They could see something unfold. They knew we were close, and we're close in this one as well. But it just raises more questions when we keep changing the style at each World Cup, and we wonder why we can't get that elusive win in the knockout stages. Is because we've approached it each different time every 4 years differently. And when you look at the players, and if you want them to go through or our system, then again, the preparation in that is giving them a blueprint to play. And like you said, you can always adapt. Like we know there's different ways and different methods, but at least we're all involved in that evolution of the way we play in our style rather than all the question marks before and after of how and why. I think that's the biggest frustration out of the Australian fans.
I think when it comes to, again, this philosophy, it's about producing players in the style that we want our future Socceroos and Matildas to play in as well. Because there could be, like, say, for instance, in this World Cup, we obviously played quite a defensive style. But if our strength in that current group is our defenders, that makes sense. It makes sense to be solid at the back and take your opportunities when you go forward. But we didn't necessarily have the strongest backline. That we knew that right wing back was a weaker point, for example, with Lewis Miller going down, but never was there a thought of, okay, we've got really talented attacking players, we've got a wealth of talented central midfielders. Shouldn't we be putting more players in those positions because that's our strength? Not to say just put out your 11 best players and hope for the best, but we should be identifying where our strengths are in each of the groups that come through. And that's what I mean about adaptability of playing style in terms of formation. So producing every single player that comes through, produce them in a way, even if that is to kind of give them a bit more freedom, and then use that in your groups going forward so that you can quickly pivot between games, in games, a formation or a style that's going to suit you best to get at the opposition, and then protect ourselves on the other side of that too.
Yeah, absolutely. And you could just see also too with the unpredictability. We're going in Asia Cup, and I reckon every fan's like, how are we going to approach this? That's why it's so unpredictable. Everyone's like going, well, what do we do now when we go to Asia? Like, is it the same? Do we do the same, or are we changing because we're going to Asia? Nations obviously ranked a lot lower than what nations are in the World Cup. And I think that's, if you want the fan engaged and identify to be part of this journey, and the player as well, it would make a lot more sense if we had something that was blueprinted. I think it's important because, especially in every age group, if they knew and put the Australian strengths into it, like you said, if they knew that that's the blueprint for Australia, and like I said, Australian fans just want to have a crack. Yeah, that's what we're all about. We don't mind being an underdog. We just want to have a crack, and if we lose, then we do it in a spirited way. Yeah, like we don't want to leave any stone unturned. And I think that's what's more important for Australian fans more than probably what we think when we look at exiting these World Cups.
I think I don't know if "have a crack" would go in an official Football Australia document, but I would certainly like to see that. But I think you're 100% right. Like, it's like that's the Aussie DNA, like, right? We kind of, I know that people wanna shift away from this underdog tag and thinking we're never gonna get, but the point is that as a nation, we tend to fight above our weight, and we tend to go in and achieve these great things despite all the challenges that we have. So I think that's perfect example of one thing that we can just put in, and that's our ability not to just kind of sit back and hope for the best, but it's actually to go at teams. We produce generally more kind of physically dominant players. So like mix that in with a bit of flair, a bit of skill, and tactics, and you never know what you can get. But very interested to hear what Football Australia do come up with. In hopefully it's not too long because I feel like we've been waiting for it for quite some time. I mean, I'd like to see it in place in the next year or so, at the very least. But it's interesting you said, Mopper, about the Asian Cup. So my question for you is that, so if we are going to stick to this 5-2-2-1 formation, who should start for the Socceroos versus Singapore in the opening game of the World Cup, and what chance do we see a change in formation?
I, I don't think we will see a change in formation. I just think the wing backs might be a little bit more proactive. The formation can work, well, if the wing backs are allowed a little bit more freedom and to express themselves and let those two tens out of the pocket. Yeah, and just I think it'll be a more mentality switch than formation. If look, I think if you look at who starts, I think there is no doubt that what we've got, we've nearly seen the best 11. Like I think with Turkey, I think you've seen the evolution. You've seen Okon come in. He's made a good move now, so I think you'll start to see the evolution of this side come through. We might see a return possibly of Lewis Miller, but then you got the likes of Daniel Benny that was picked in that overall 46-man squad that has got talent that can play in that position, depending on Italiano's fitness. So we do have backup, and then we've got Overy underneath that as well. So I don't think you're going to see too much shift away from the current squad, but there are still 3 or 4 positions depth-wise that we can still test out moving towards Asia Cup. But I think we all know that probably the Toure, Irakunda, Valpardo or Metcalf combination hopefully will be unleashed at this Asia Cup. And I think we're going to finally see what we wish when we go there. I think this was all in. I know we don't like to say it, but it was tested, I think, Valpardo to see what level he's at in the World Cup for that scenario coming up. You can't deny that we would have no doubt tested those waters in which we have, which is a positive thing. So look, I think the midfield, there's still plenty of depth in the midfield. I don't think it's going to be too much changed. Irvine's position probably is, he's still at a good age, even though he's the elder statesman of the group. So I think you'll probably see only the fringes really change with maybe the evolution of that right wing back to test a little bit more depth in that position. But I think everyone else is probably, not too far away from what we've got now.
I think for me, the differences we might see in a starting lineup might be, as you said, how far those wingbacks or how much free license those wingbacks have to get forward. But I also think the two defensive midfield spots, what he does with them could be very interesting in terms of, does he play more progressive? Like, could you possibly see an Okon paired with an Alex Robertson, for example? So you're more looking at your progressive six in Ocon, and you're more looking at like your eight in Alex Robertson. Like, could we see some more progressiveness in those positions so that when we get the ball, we can actually get forward and support those front three as well?
Yeah, I definitely think we can. I think that's why Ocon starting at the World Cup was really important in those first couple of games, because that's the future direction, isn't it? And I think with his move, if it works out and he starts or gets some good solid game time, I think that next 6 months is going to be massive. There's still, like you said, plenty of backup there. Like you said, Robertson just got in off the cusp, played in League One, now in the Championship. That'll be a different story now if he starts in the Championships and progresses and gets a really good 6 months behind him. So he's right on the tail, isn't there? And there's plenty more coming through as well. So I think it is a good opportunity for those who just missed out. I think that's what was important about probably that 46 squad that was assembled, those extra additional players, just to make sure that they're still on this ride for the journey. I think that's why that part of that big squad was more important. I think looking ahead, it was a perfect time to do it. I think cost wise, a lot of people would have questioned. A lot of countries just come out and pick their squad, but I think we're thinking a little bit further ahead with that move, bringing in a lot more players than what we needed to in that training camp.
All right, mate. I'm just going to go to a question from Zio Returns, who's asked, how do you feel about the Asian Cup going forward?
Look, it's our sixth appearance. I think, last couple of times we've been knocked out in the quarterfinals against obviously, tough opposition. It's going to be difficult because in Saudi Arabia, playing over there is a different beast. So, but I think with this group coming along, I think we're well known that our defence is really going to hold up at this tournament. And I think if the players that are playing and starting now in that World Cup really get to the right clubs and play football in the next 6 months, I'd be pretty confident we can go pretty deep. I think we're Japan's challenger, aren't we? But when we go over to Asia, Saudi Arabia, it brings in the Qatars and the Saudi Arabias and the and Irans and the Iraqs of that caliber, brings them up to the level pegging field, I think, when we go away to these nations. So it's going to be tough, but we've got to win that group to put ourselves in the best position. And if we can do that, then I'll be confident we can at least get to the final and put on a good show. I think this group will be ready. I think it takes great experience and had to learn some pretty hard lessons there, but we've got some good lessons too. So I think it's going to be another stepping stone for this next group. Is Japan probably just a bit too far ahead of us? Well, on neutral ground, you never know. I know we beat them in Perth, but that was the second string team in that Japan played. And look, honestly, they had nothing to play for when they come to Perth.
I think I read before that we will play Japan in the semi-finals if we both top our group. So I guess that means that semi-final is the minimum requirement from this group. I take your point about being in the Middle East and how those conditions might level it a little bit for some of those Arab nations, but I still think that where we expect this team to be, semi-finals, if it ends up being against Japan, is the absolute minimum for this team. And I think if we have any ambitions to do better in the 2030 World Cup, that we need to start pushing ahead and making sure, because the 2030 World Cup is going to be challenging as well, split across South America and northern parts of Africa and Europe as well. So that's going to be a challenge in itself as well. So we need to get used to playing in these different conditions and being able to adapt as required.
Yep, it'll be this group is, being touted, and that's the benefit they're going to have to carry with them. But again, if you want to be the best and to evolve to the best, then you're going to need those high expectations to go along with it. So it's going to be an exciting journey, and yeah, cut weight. That's in February, so yeah, it'll come along quick.
All right, let's stick to Asian Cup and Socceroos. This is a couple of questions here from Ozlock. After the Asian Cup, should we drop Popper as coach? If we adopted another Aussie coach, who would you choose between Milligan and Kuehl? And third one, are there any quality international coaches Australia could afford?
Look, I think the good option is that we know we've got Milligan, Kuehl. There's plenty of Aussie coaches, Kevin Muscat as well, that would no doubt love to coach their country. I
So
think Milligan's still got a lot to prove. I think if you can give it to someone, give it to Muscat.
So Milligan v Kuehl, I think I'd tip Milligan, but I agree with you. I'd have Muscat ahead of both of those. If given the chance, I think Milligan's on a good trajectory, but still quite unproven. And Kuehl, unfortunately, I think he's in Vietnam at the moment, but probably hasn't flooded as a coach to this point. So I don't think he necessarily deserves the Socceroos job to have a look in at just at the moment. And I just think purely we as a federation can't afford any quality international coaches. So there's plenty out there, but either their valuation's too high, or they're not up to the caliber of what we would want, I would think. All right, mate. Next one's going to come from Beck, who asked which team was more culturally significant between the Matildas or the Socceroos between the last Women's World Cup and the Men's World Cup this year.
The Matildas by an absolute mile. You can just see by the viewing figures of the Matildas has been it's been outshining every bit of numbers from AFL to rugby league to the Socceroos. The Matildas are the number one team in Australia. We're not talking about men and women. We're talking about in sport in general. So definitely the Matildas, due to their viewing, the massive effect that they've had on kids, and they've triggered a massive surge in numbers in grassroots, boys and girls. I know girls absolutely more than so boys, but the boys have been captured by that as well. And they're just a symbol, aren't they? They're just a symbol of our game, and I think they have much more cultural significance and much more push and valuable. They're much more valuable than the Socceroos, because that, to me, they hold the key to Australian football. And as soon as we get this national game going, to get the grassroots together with the pyramid, sooner the better. And you've just seen the Matildas they've held the Asia Cup like the men did in 2015, but the women have held a World Cup as well. The significance of it is absolutely far outreaching than the Socceroos.
Yeah, I agree with you. And I was just thinking, obviously, this morning we saw Argentina play Switzerland in the quarterfinals of the World Cup. So if we were to have progressed past Egypt and then, for example, past Argentina, we'll be playing Switzerland in the quarterfinal. And I just kind of thought about those big viewing figures that we saw for the Matildas in the Women's World Cup in 2023. And I just thought to myself, in if the Socceroos were to get to a quarterfinal of a World Cup, like what kind of interest and viewing figures? Because I think that really plays into it too, like the legitimate chance of the national team doing well and progressing through a tournament as well. I think that makes a big difference in terms of the nation getting behind her and what cultural significance they have. But we've said this before, and I know you're pretty adamant about it, but the Matildas have done a great job in actually embracing the public. They took a stand quite some time ago now to decide that that was what they're going to do, and all those kind of run of games of sold out Matildas games around the country, that was on the back of them sticking behind, signing autographs, taking selfies, putting themselves, being available for the fans. And the fans have kind of come on the back of that and made sure that they're rewarded for that as well. So that's the kind of shift that we saw. And that's a big reason why those big significant shifts came in the Women's World Cup. Yes, it helped that it was in Australia and it was more kind of in people's faces and the time zones were friendly and all those kinds of things. Of course, that helps. but they've made a big effort in making sure that they're available to the public, and they've got the rewards for that. And not only that, but we see someone like a Sam Kerr who, and even Steph Catley, who was shortlisted for a Ballon d'Or, but they're kind of world-renowned names, and they're playing at some of the biggest clubs in the world, which is just not the case for the men, for the Socceroos. So I think all of that definitely helps. But yeah, I agree with you completely that the Matildas culturally more significant than the Socceroos at this point. But that's not to say that that won't change in the future. If this young, talented group of the Socceroos does what the Matildas have done in terms of making themselves available and their household names at some of the bigger clubs in the world, who knows what that looks like in the next few years. All right, Mopper. Next question is from Chris. I mean, it's a big one. How do we fix our infrastructure and funding issues?
Well, probably the hardest question of the lot, isn't it? I think this is probably, if I look at it holistically, it probably requires FIFA funding, the government, I think every federation, and the league, Football Australia itself, all to be aligned in this. It's the only way. I know that the Football Australia has tried to address this with the 3 billion in funding that they've put to the government on what's required, and that's to do with community, elite legacy programs, national football headquarters. That is up there. But they've been trying to push for that for a while. The government have given us some handouts, but nothing significant. And 3 billion in a time of financial pain, probably for the country, is a massive ask. But it's over a long-term strategy that they want. So look, that's crucial. There's no doubt the government plays a part. I think the funding issues comes from sponsorship and TV for me, because that allows us the extra flexibility and freedom. And we've probably sold ourselves short, I believe, in this area. We've had, ever since like 2006, we've had opportunities. We've had the Asia Cup win. We've had great success at World Cups from the girls and the boys. There's been big moments in the A-League. There's been paths, and we just haven't captured it as a whole with our instability. How do we fix it? We've really got to drive a harder bargain, I think, with sponsorship. But again, with our game, we're leveraging off, and we're battling some of the biggest codes with rugby league and AFL. They really dominate this market, so it's really difficult to get and squeeze a dollar out of the TV rights and the sponsorship. But I believe the Matildas with the custodians of this and have the biggest opportunity with the numbers and the growth that we just spoke about. I do think we're missing a Lowy though. We had the right people there funding it, and I think this is why we had a lot of success at the start. Do we have that custodian that's going to take this over and can forge us forward? Well, I don't know if they're out there, but I think a lot of people are trying. Probably not to Lowy's level, but there's a lot of people trying underneath the surface. But the funding issues are massive because, again, we've seen Football Australia, we're just losing that little bit, and we know the A-League's copping a hammering. So and the Football Australia been plugging the hole. I think Football Australia would be making a profit if it wasn't for the A-League's losses in the last few years. So that's the funding one's a really tough one. The infrastructure needs the government. You must have the government involved in the infrastructure. It is huge. It's not a football issue. It's a community issue, and it needs funding on every level of government to fix that infrastructure. And if they did back that 3 billion, it'd be a great start. And we need that across the line. But have we got the power and the push to get that over the line? I don't think we do at the moment, but I think the government does recognise the fact that women's sport is highly underfunded, and the facilities for women and men just aren't up to scratch in a lot of areas and a lot of sports. So watch this space. If we ever get back in a healthy position, I think there would be significant investment within that, especially around the change rooms and the facilities of sporting communities. But yeah, I think it's our biggest challenge in football, this, and it's probably held us back for a fair while.
It's a very tricky question because I think the challenge that Australia has is that we're so unique in our kind of geographic profile in terms of we've got a big, large country, obviously, and your small population, but it's condensed into a lot of the areas on the eastern seaboard. So I saw someone suggest to get rid of all the state federations and have Football Australia run everything from their level, which probably happens in other countries. But I think in terms of what Australia has to deal with, I think that would be very challenging. We already know Football Australia. It would certainly take out some fighting and some of the ability for the state federations to act on their own best interest instead of the best interests of the game itself. That would certainly be the case. But I think in terms of the support and the structure that you need for players and coaches and everyone else involved in football coming up, I think that would be very, very challenging to do that unless you are going to make people from the different state federations employees of Football Australia and just have everything kind of come up to that level. So I think that is a possibility, but we're so unique in that. I saw someone quote Canada might be about as close as we have to something similar in terms of the way our country is set up. So that would be a challenge. Funding, I tend to agree. I think there would be some commercial outcomes that we could go for. It's definitely the model of Lowy in terms of his Westfield arrangement that he had and being able to put money into the game that way. But I think it's about I think the difference with the NRL and the AFL is that they have good relationships with government, and for whatever reason that is. But if Football Australia can have those similar or just as good relationships with government that those other two codes do, then we'll put ourselves in a very good position to be able to work with government. But what I've also heard from government in the past is that if a certain thing is wanted by the game of football in Australia is that they're getting approached by Football Australia and they're getting approached by Football Queensland and they're getting approached by, say, an A League club, for example. And it's really about us getting on the same page as code and saying this is what we want for the benefit of the whole of the game. So I can see a lot of arguments are there. So I don't think we've actually fixed the problem, Chris, in our answers, but I think we've kind of discussed a few of the issues, and it's probably about Football Australia being a bit more aligned. Hopefully, Martin Kugler coming in can actually do this in the structure of where Heather Garriock is coming out as well. We know that there's been some job cuts, and maybe that's just the kind of reset they need to kind of launch from here, and I hope that's the case.
I think with Chris's question too, Chief, the only way to really fix it is, and this is why so many football family members are so desperate for the Socceroos and Matildas to succeed, is because if as those national teams succeed, that puts the public pressure on the funding, and that puts and it puts all sponsorship and TV rights up to another level. That's why we're so desperate for the Socceroos to succeed and the Matildas, because if they do succeed, Socceroos break through and win a knockout tournament in the World Cup, or win the Asia Cup, or the Matildas can go all the way in the World Cup, it would change the landscape, because success is the only way to really fix a couple of these problems, isn't it?
Yeah, and you're right. And again, that comes back to the point of Football Australia being able to leverage those opportunities to say, even for the example of the Socceroos, for that Egypt game, for example, it's like, look how many people are turning up at Federation Square in the middle of the night to go watch this team play. That's how many people are passionate about it. Look at the viewership numbers. That's how many people are passionate about this team and this code. If you put some money behind it, we can make this even better. But yeah, it's a bit like the chicken and the egg, right? Like it's like who's gonna go first? Is it success that brings the money, or is it the money that brings the success?
Hmm. But yeah, great question. All right, Chief, keep firing at us. What do we got?
All right, let's go to a few more domestic matters, leveraging again through the Socceroos. But AJ Aussie Spurs says, should Paramount and Football Australia get the Socceroos players who've been involved in the A-League to do a short video to promote the A-League for this season.
Oh, any promotion's good promotion, and you've got some A-League players that were there at the World Cup, so that we'd just start with them. You know, we've seen such high profile Patrick Beach have such a great tournament. Bage come in at the end. Paul Okon, you know, has just made a move, but you know, I've got no doubt that they'd be fantastic ambassadors, even though they're looking for other moves to promote the A League. The only thing is there is a bit of a gap, but you know, there's why football's hot and still in that market with the World Cup still continuing. It just made common sense, and that's a really good point made. And I think we've just got to leverage anything that we can get.
Yeah, I think, look, generally the marketing of the A-League in seasons past has been light on, and that's probably sugarcoating that a little bit. So, yeah, anything that we can do, and why not leverage the success of how many A-League players or former A-League players ended up being in that Socceroos squad that progressed to the round of 32 at the World Cup. You mentioned before there, Mopper, the big gap between the off season. So let's go to a question from Jacob. How can we shorten our off season? Is there a way to extend the season or even have some form of tournament prior to the teams participating in the Australian Cup? It's too long without football.
Yeah, Hun Cup's round of 32 starts this week, so that's a good start. But again, if you get knocked out, that's it for a while. So, look, the only way to fix this is to get the domestic calendar right. Promotion relegation or two-tier leagues would fix this. More teams, more games. There's clubs that want to do it. We just need it backed. And I think this is what's holding us back financially going forward. I think that result last year with Football Australia losing that money just stops that becoming real. But I think the time for talk around this promo relegation just needs to happen, and just confirming what we all know, that the season needs to be longer with, I believe, just take out the summer, the heat around February. I think that's come up nearly every year in the last 10 years, hasn't it? And have like a winter, well, not a winter break, obviously they do in Europe, but a summer break for us. And then that way it just make more sense. We've got to stop worrying about what the other codes are doing, and just back our own game. And that as soon as we fix the calendar, you've seen Japan move their calendar and vice versa. The sooner we just worry about our game, the better. But it's another terrific question.
I think with the new FIFA international window, which I think is going to cover about 4 weeks in, I think is October and November, that will obviously be a big gap in the calendar, which will stretch out the season a little bit. But I think for some of the clubs, it's more like we could extend the season a bit longer, so we extend another 5 or 6 rounds. But it's actually the cost of for the clubs of the flights and the accommodation and everything that goes on with that to extend that out. So rather than put that strain on the clubs, I think we'd have to move to some kind of a hub situation to be able to play some extra games, and whether that's part of the A League or whether that's part of a different tournament. I'm not necessarily suggesting we go back to a Unite round, but it could be a preseason cup or something like that, where at least we get these fixtures in and it gives players some more competitive games. But in saying that, the clubs themselves are going to have to make sure that they take it to a point of seriousness. But you can't really force that in terms of what you do, but maybe some prize money attached to that. But look, again, it comes back to cost. So I think, once we get the clubs a bit more stabilized, we might be able to extend the season out. But I certainly agree that promotion and relegation could fix that as well. But yeah, it's a tough one. And look, I agree with you in terms of what we don't need to worry about the other codes in terms of, if we started the season earlier and it cut into the end of the AFL and NRL regular season, outside of ground sharing, we shouldn't be too worried. Fans are either going to support one or the other, or they're going to support both. It's not necessarily taking one away from another. So, there was even a quote from last season from, I think, one of the Roosters players questioning Andrew Redmayne, saying, "Oh, I didn't even know your season had started, and we're into about round 4 or 5." So it shows, if the general public's not that aware of the league starting, and this again comes back to the marketing of the league, but just go, just start it, align it with the European calendar. Start around August, run it through to around May, provided the clubs can afford it. I think we just go back to that style.
Yep, no, definitely agree. Good question. All right,
All
mate.
right,
What else?
Mr. Diamond, how do we get the A League back to a 2005 to 2018 feel of matches, fast attacking, great goals, full stadiums, great players, and even international players? Missing the vibes that got me into the league I love.
Yeah, this is another fantastic question, and I dived in a little bit of a different way this one because I thought, well, how can we do it now, considering that America and Saudi Arabia taking those players that would normally venture further away from Europe? America's obviously got a massive financial hold, and the World Cup's driving that as well. And but a lot of players, like the Messis, but have taken a lot more than just Messi over to America, where they're promoting the game. And we've seen that the previous couple of years with Saudi Arabia, with a lot of players, even younger, going over there, and we've lost that whole market, haven't we, to drag it in? So I thought, then what else can we do? And there was a lady that come out last year called Banderi. Remember her, Chief? And she's still tied to Wellington. Unfortunately, she got struck down by injury. But I have to look at how much drive from the Nepalese community that got connected with her over the Ninja A-League, and how many people turned up to see her play. And then I thought, well, what's Australia population? Tell me what we've got. So I looked at our country diversity, and I thought there's some Chinese, English, India, New Zealand, Philippines, Vietnam, and South Africa, Nepal, Sri Lanka, Malaysia. There's a lot of diversity within these ranks. So I thought, well, if we've got Banderi from Nepal, then why don't we look and remember that World Cup qualifier? Was it against Vietnam? I think it was it Vietnam or Philippines that we went to? Was it
Indonesia.
Indonesia? Sorry, to take the third one. And you've seen how many people from that country supported their club and identified. I couldn't hear myself in that Sydney stadium because the fans were absolutely electric. So I think we've got to open our mind up. And I look at Jan Marta, his experience as well coming over, and now he owns a bit of the Melbourne Victory, and so there's still those fringe players around Europe that will come out. But why don't we tap into to the different markets that we've got that are living here? Because I think if you maybe track down we've seen a few Australian players go to Vietnam. What's wrong with using the marquee players, the Vietnamese best player, and getting them out here, like, and tapping into that population, or the Philippines or Indonesia, or there are players out there that are very well recognised in these countries. They love football just as much as us. So I reckon we have to go down that market and tap into that, because I think Bandera is a perfect example of how we need to evolve and look at the A-League a little bit differently, because we're not going to be able to get the Del Pieros, are we, anymore? We might be able to get one or two around the fringes, but we're not going to be able to get as many like the Dwight Yorks as what we did before, because there's too much financial dispersity over in those other countries. So I thought, let's look at the other market around Asia, and we've brought in some very successful Japanese players that Sydney FC have brought in that have captured the interest. So I think we need to stick to the Asian market and look at some other countries that are actually heavily populated within our country.
I will say that Brisbane Roar tried to do that with Rafael Stroik, not last season, the season before. The Indonesian player, grew their social media following through the roof with all the Indonesian fans. Didn't turn out to be the most fantastic player, so I think that is a qualifier as well to make sure that if we get out here is actually a decent player that's going to fit the league as well. But I saw interested to hear what you think of this one, mate. I saw someone suggest James Rodriguez come out from Colombia on the back of, remember all the support that Colombia got in the Women's World Cup. Obviously, superstars like Linda Caicedo
Yeah.
and their team, but I think that would be a nice little one to get, whether we could meet his financial requirements or not. But I think that would be a really interesting one in terms of us getting foreign players. But I just want to go back to Mr. Diamond's question, because I think this is maybe some of the criticism of the A-League for people that maybe I don't know, maybe don't quite look at it that closely, but he says fast. I think the league's kind of fast enough. Attacking, I think it's attacking. I think we see some great goals. We definitely don't see full stadiums outside of the odd derby, which is unfortunate. Great players and even international players, I suppose. When you're talking about kind of former Socceroos coming back, or those big names like as you said, like Dwight York or Del Piero or Heskey or Shinji Ono, we're not seeing those types of players anymore. I honestly don't think we will, while the money is available in Saudi Arabia and in the USA as well. So I think yeah, you're right. We need to be a bit smarter about the international players that we bring in. But I think it's in terms of back to AJ Aussie Spurs' point about getting these players to promote, because we are sell it as we're seeing the future Socceroos and the future Matildas in this league, and it's only a matter of years until we're going to see them doing their thing on the world stage. So it's almost like get out there and support them, and be able to share in the experience that I saw that player play. Look at Nestori Kunda as an example. I saw him make his debut as a 16-year-old or 17-year-old, whatever he was, in the A League, and now look at him going on to sign for Bayern Munich and do all these things on the world stage. Lucas Harrington the same, right? Like he might be at one of the bigger
Yeah,
clubs in the
yeah.
next 6 months or so. So I think again, it comes back to how we can sell the league, because there are some fantastic players in the league that are going to go on and do amazing things in their career. So it's how we can actually sell the league with the constraints that we do have on it.
Yeah, and I think with the full stadiums, they've just got to open up to the football members of those who are tied up with clubs, and but that's up to the A League clubs themselves too to tap into their community. You've seen Auckland really get that, and Western Sydney had it when they entered into the market, didn't they? They really tapped into
Yeah.
the local community, and Auckland are doing that now. We've had some pretty, they've had some different days to promote the club, and they've had like slides and all that kind of stuff. And, there are things out there that clubs are doing, and you can see the ones that are really connected and touched into that market to try to promote it within themselves. Even was it the shirt day for Sydney FC and Central Coast? I can't remember exactly what that one they were promoting, but even that, that draws attention, doesn't it? And gives fans something to go to. So I think there's some smart ideas out there. We just got to, like you said, promote it a bit more, and yeah, hopefully we can get those vibes back. But I'll tell you what, I must admit, like if Harrington was still playing at Brisbane or Chief, I'm sure Brisbane's membership would have gone through the roof, isn't it? We've seen a star in our A League, like you said, and there's plenty more of them, which you rightly point out.
Yeah. Big call by Ruben Dakovic, but turned out to be pretty spot on, calling him the best defender in Australia before he'd even made an A-League appearance. All right, let's go to the next one from Joel. Why doesn't the ACT have a permanent A-League club for women and men?
Oh, mate, this is heartbreak for the community up there. I looked into this today. They've got over 42,000 members, Chief, that are actually registered and playing up there. So that's a huge amount of people. It's one of the largest participation sport in the territory. It doubles all the other codes numbers. So I guess they just haven't found the right buyer or owner, have they? Like there's a number of times where the league themselves have pushed Canberra to get in there, but they just haven't got anyone that stepped up and backed them, like, or with the financial capability of doing so. The capital, down there have done what they've can, but we just seen like with the women, just so much unknown down there that someone's got to tap into that market, isn't it, and back them. I'm sure there's been plenty of people have put investment into Canberra football. We need that one that's going to take it all away, don't they? But it's definitely been explored. And look, as I said, with the participation numbers and the fan base down there, geez, I think we're missing a market, aren't we?
Yeah, definitely agree. And we were supposed to have a decision on the Canberra license on Thursday, just gone this week, but that's gone and passed, and we haven't heard any news, or certainly none that I'm aware of anymore. But I think there were two potential buyers, and we were hoping that one of those was going to come about, and that particularly for the women's team, I think they've been through the ringer in terms of if they're in the competition or out of the competition. But I think for the men, we've seen such good players come out of that Canberra region over the years, and I think it will be a very good thing to have a Canberra license. And let's not forget that they were supposed to come in the same year as Auckland FC, and look how that's just been stalled, and look how Auckland's thrived in that competition in the A League. So, yeah, look, good question from Joel, and look, they definitely should, and hopefully, as I said, there's news sooner rather than later. It won't be in next season for the men. Hopefully, the women will be, but I believe the men's draw is supposed to be out in the next week or so. So we won't see Canberra in that one, but hopefully there's an announcement, maybe even a joint announcement around the draw to say that they are going to be in for the following season. It'll be something to look forward to, and I think without promotion and relegation, it's something that the league really needs. It needs a different flavour to be added in every now and then.
Yeah, 100%. Hopefully, yeah, we wish you all the best. Hopefully Canberra can be represented because the numbers speak the truth. They just need that financial security.
All right, a couple of short ones to finish, Mopper. A question from Rabin. Apologies if I've mispronounced that one. Should the A-League patch be on the sleeve rather than the chest?
Well, it's in Europe it is, but it's slowly changing over in Europe as well. Look, I looked into this one again today, and it's all commercial. So we've seen the competition. They want the visibility, and they want to maximize it. That's why it's on the chest. You would see obviously overseas that it's on the sleeve, but it's commercial reasons why this has been put on the chest. So we have to look at what makes us financially more viable, but it just leaves opportunity for the sleeve for other endeavors with investments. So that's what I looked into today. And look, I agree. I think on the sleeve, traditional, but you even see in Europe now that some are changing just to get more financial out of that shirt. So yeah, it does make sense, but again, whatever can get the financial reward is what we need to look at.
Bit of an Australian thing too. I mean, the NRL and AFL both have theirs on the chest as well. So I suppose we've got to lean into that as well. All right, last one before we look at some transfers, Mopper. This was from Oliver, who's asked who is the brightest young star for the future, men's and women's.
Ooh, wow. Well, look, I'm excited, and I'm going to go with people already know who they're talking about now after the World Cup, but I'm going to put Daniel Benny will have a breakout year this year. He's just at the 20s level. He was our top goal scorer in the World Cup under 20s. Had a great campaign at the Asia Cup when we won it. I think he'll have a breakout year, but I like probably. I can't wait to see Neil and Okon's brother. I think their potential down the track. I'll go a little bit deeper because I think we know who's at the Socceroos level. But yeah, I can't wait to see Neil, who's at Sunderland, Lucas Neil's son. He's played and represented Australia too at the under 17s level. I can't wait to see how that progression goes now Sunderland's in the Premier League, that he's playing in those under 18 tournaments. James Overy's another one. So that's from the male point of view. I think from the girls, I'm really looking forward to seeing how Alana Murphy goes over in the championship. She was in the Bundesliga 2 last year. She's a young midfielder and been on the cusp with the Matildas. I think she's had about 6 or 7 caps now. I'm really looking forward. I think she'll have a breakout year now. She's in the championship over there. But geez, underneath, I love DeSantos is back from injury this year. Can't wait to see how she goes. She was red hot in the Australian younger teams, and probably Sky Helmrich just below that as well. She's going to be a cracker in the future. So I just love her aggressive style and watched her at I think it was the Asian Cup for the younger teams. Her mentality was just like incredible, and looking forward to that one. But yeah, there's plenty of talent underneath. Don't you worry about that, men's and women's. So there's a lot more names I could have added locally as well. So a few. I'm sure Chief, you'll chip me on as well.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree. I think Marcus Neal has an exciting future. We've seen some goalkeepers be picked up over there in the UK as well. There's plenty of talent around. I'm looking forward to a few of those guys that are kind of in their kind of 20s to 21, 22, probably ones that we don't get a lot of game time or recognition for the Socceroos. We obviously know that the likes of Okon and Harrington, they're kind of destined for some bigger things, but I really want to see guys like Sapsford and Jed Drew and those types of players kick on this season and start to push their case for the Socceroos. Look, in terms of youngsters, Gianluca Ocon definitely is one for the future. I love some of the kids coming out of the A-League. Hayne Eames, I think he's destined for some big things. Quinn McNichol, we've spoken about lots of times as well. Max Caputo, I think, probably needs to have a big season this season as well. If he can, bang away. We don't see big golden boot winners in the A-League, but if he could push up towards 20 goals or so this season. Marcus Eunice is a fantastic talent coming through as well. Yeah, there's plenty on the men's side. On the women's side, look, a bit older, but I think Kyra Cooney-Crosby, obviously well documented why she's not playing for Arsenal at the moment. But I think with some of the changing of the guard at Arsenal, that could be a big breakout season for her. And I really want to see, not that people don't know who she is, but Mary Fowler, I want to see her kick on this season at Manchester City, get some consistent game time to fulfill her potential. Daniela Galic as well over in Sweden. I think she has a fantastic future. I want to see her be considered for a few more Matildas camps in the future. So yeah, look, Oliver, we could go on for days and days about all the young talent around, but we probably haven't identified just one on each side because we got a bit carried away. But yeah, if a few of those haven't been heard by the football public, there's some names to look out for sure.
No, I think there's so many names, Chief, because the last 12 months we've had the privilege of following these players up and the excitement of it. There's just so much talent coming through, and yeah, just trying to find their right balance at their clubs, aren't they?
All right, mate. Speaking of, Paul Okon has, I don't think we've seen it officially announced, but it's pretty much been well documented by about everyone, but that he's on his way to FC Koln in the Bundesliga. What do you make of that move?
We were in Cologne. Remember that in 2006?
Yep.
I remember that you went to the stadium, which is also pretty cool. They're the inaugural Bundesliga champions in 63-64. Nicknamed the Billy Goat and featured on their crest is the Billy Goat. This stadium's 50,000. So why did they go for Ocon? So I picked it deeper, and it was because the move for one of their midfielders, starting midfielder in Eric Martel, has moved. So he was there for 5 years. He had 121 games, has left that club. So they've covered it with Ocon, and they had Tom Krug, who was on loan. They've signed him permanently as well for that defensive midfield position or midfield position. He only played 26 games last year, and they do play a very similar style to the Socceroos, kind of like a 5-3-2. Ocon would be used for, and I think that's why, again, that kind of style they picked him up.
I'm excited to see him go and play and hopefully play significant minutes in the Bundesliga. I think there's every chance that he does go there and play significant minutes, which we absolutely need in preparation for the Asian Cup as well. So, yeah, look, it's a big move for him. He was obviously only back at Sydney FC for one season, but had a really successful season at Sydney FC. I think he was their player of the year. Yeah, just really developed so well on the back of the Under-20 Asian Cup and then the Under-20 World Cup as well, and really kicked on and had a big season for Sydney FC. I think he had one injury throughout the season, and Sydney FC definitely missed him in that time. But yeah, what an opportunity this is for him to kick on. As I said, he was only at Sydney FC for one season. They got reportedly 1 million euros for him, which a lot of people see as undervalued. I certainly had that feeling at first, but when you contemplate that Sydney FC did just bring him back, and what a what a good bit of business that is, probably from Sydney FC to turn that into a profit, having this talent to come back for one season. But I think it probably also shows that before we can start demanding bigger fees, we need these players to go to these top five leagues and play in the following season. be ready-made players rather than being a development player like we've seen with a few other examples.
Yeah, good point, and that's what we need. Like you said, ready-made players. And I think he'll fit the bill there, and it's a really smart move. I think this is a very good choice. He's made some very good decisions. I think Paul Okon, Junior, and I think this is another one.
Cammy Devlin following his manager Derek McInnes and Lawrence Shanklin from Hearts up to Rangers. Outside of Matty McKay, who was there for a brief stint, it's been over 20 years since we've seen an Australian play at Rangers. We had Craig Moore, Tony Vidmar, and of course Kevin Muscat. But big move for Devlin, I think. Obviously, Hearts were ahead of Rangers on the table last season, but I think it's more the expectations of that club that are going to be a big step up for him.
Yeah, it's a lot of competition. They're in Europa League though, which is a bonus. Yeah, Hearts would have been in Europe as well, but yeah, they signed Dan Neal as well from Sunderland. He's a central midfielder, and they've got some depth in there as well. They're all different style of midfielders, but yeah, I guess with Europe and the Scottish Premier League and what it offers, he had an outstanding year last year. So yeah, he's got his work cut out. But like you said, the prestige of the club, hopefully he can get in that starting lineup and make it his own there, the six. But yeah, it'll be very interesting. Glad his coach has gone with him, but that'll be an important step to make sure he gets games.
Yeah, I think it's like he's obviously going to have to play well to get game time, but that his manager's at least going to give him a shot, being a former Hearts manager, and I think that he was a big fan of Devlin as well. So he's definitely going to be given an opportunity, and it's just how well he takes that. Where do you think he's at in terms of the Socceroos mix? We've got a lot of depth in that position now. He obviously went to the World Cup, didn't play a minute, unfortunately. But do you think he's in that mix, or do you think some of the players around are kind of surpassing him a little bit?
No, I don't think they surpassed him. I think he showed what his good value is. I know there's a lot of criticism that they don't see enough progressiveness with his football. He's more that defensive midfielder type, which he is, and Ocon's a lot more technical. We underutilized him. I thought America would have been a great game for him to be introduced in, just because he's in those intense environments and would have I think done a better showing there. But I still think he's in the mix. I think he goes to Rangers. He needed to go somewhere to elevate, didn't he? He needs to show that next step. And let's see how he goes against some higher players week in, week out, and having to back up. And if he does, and he plays and he has another good year like he did last year, he should be knocking on that door, because he's, to me, he is for what Popper plays. I just can't work out why Popper's probably underutilized him. And we had those injuries as well prior to the World Cup, that I thought with him being in that squad, we would have seen a lot more game time. But again, like with Arnold, he's just on that fringe, isn't he? And like you said, lot of depth there, so he's work cut out. But is it the right club to prove it?
Yep. All right. We'll wait and see how he goes at Rangers. A few more transfers. Alexia Apostolakis has moved from Melbourne City to Bristol City in the WSL2, and Jamila Rankin has gone to Eintracht Frankfurt. So interesting for both of those women is see if they get some game time. And Yaya Dekuli has gone to Slovenian Primera Liga champions NK Celje. Interesting move for DeCooley. I thought he might try somewhere else, but interesting that he's gone to that league.
Yeah, it was that was years ago, wasn't he? He had a crack and was unsuccessful and come back home. But yeah, look, Slovenia, they're in Europe and they got the league, so plenty of opportunity if he can prove himself. It's probably an interesting one to say, is it a big step or not? But look, we've seen a lot of players unsuccessfully go over to Europe last year and come back to the A League. Let's hope he's not one of them. He did have a good year last year, so we wish him all the best, and hopefully he's got that starting there and he can showcase himself in the Champions League. Wouldn't that be something to see?
Absolutely, mate. All right, and some of the clubs in Europe in particular going back with some club friendlies. The season is just around the corner. So for Dundee United, we saw Lockie Rose and Josh Rawlins and Zach Sapsford play. Sapsford won and converted a penalty in stoppage time. for their 1-0 win in the League Cup, I think that is, or some kind of preseason cup. Alex Robertson took the armband for Cardiff. They got hammered by FC Midtjylland, but it's good to see Robertson back on the field. And this one was very interesting, Oppa. Gianluca Ocon, who we've spoken about a bit already, off the bench for Club Brugge. So yeah, interesting that the youngster is getting a look in the preseason. Wonder if he's part of their plans.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. He was in the Champions League final, wasn't he, for the under-17s against Real Madrid last year and last season, I should say. Yeah, big raps on him. Hot tip that he's right up there. So, look, if he's on the bench in preseason, we would love to see him get some game time somewhere, or maybe even alone. Really good at his age. Yeah, watch this space in the next 12 months. I can't wait to see this development of another Ocon. They could be anchoring our midfield in 4 years' time, Chief.
Well, surely if he starts getting a few minutes off the bench even for this team, that he'll be in the Socceroos calculations for the Asian Cup. That's a big club. It's a big
Yeah,
club. It's a big club in
yeah,
Europe. So,
yep,
you know, if they see him at that level, why not for the Socceroos?
yep. Let's just make sure we cap him straight away because yeah, look, long journey. Like Harrington and that, still a long way to go, isn't it? But it's just exciting that we're underneath. And like I said, he held his own against Real Madrid. And hey, what better way to develop play football and get on that stage than against the best of the best at that age? He's had a great apprenticeship and he's still only young. So, yeah, looking forward to what the next 12 months brings in that situation. Should be fantastic.
All right. Lastly, we've got Jordy Boss confirmed to be out for several months with an injury, not an ACL, which was potentially first feared, which is fantastic news. But it looks like he'll miss the start of the Eredivisie season, which is unfortunate for Jordy Boss, but looks like it could have been a lot worse.
Yeah, let's just hopefully for a speedy recovery. It's length of time's going to be interesting on this one. I think they're in the Champions League too, aren't they, final or in the Champions League qualifier? So yeah, look, Europe beckons again. So it'll be a long season. So let's hope he gets his fitness right. And can't wait to see him back for the Socceroos later on in the year.
Yeah, pretty sure they did qualify for Champions League, finishing second in the league. So, yeah, plenty of games to for Jordy Boss to come into. But yeah, just wishing him well in his recovery after that injury against Egypt. All right, Mopper, 100 episodes done and dusted. Thank you, everyone, for your questions. Some absolutely brilliant ones in there. Good for us to discuss and debate. All of those, always plenty happening in Australian football.
Yeah, love hearing from everyone. This is what makes it, doesn't it? Debating what's on your mind is what's on ours. So many passionate fans. That's what it's all about. That's what we support and love, and that's why we do it. So, and thank you, Chief, for our 100th episode. Enlightened a lot of people on board, a lot of information to our fans, and quality input that you do for the Aussie game. So, great stuff, mate.
Thanks, mate. And you too. We'll stop patting ourselves on the back and let's wrap it
Get
up
back to
there.
work.
Yeah, we'll be back. We'll be back next Sunday. There's obviously plenty of Australian football. We expect the A-League draw soon. The round of 32 of the Australia Cup will commence this week. So there's going to be plenty to report on next week. And we look forward to your company, hopefully then. Until then, enjoy your football.